Mhm.
How's Christmas coming up, Chris? You got some cool plans for Christmas?
Yeah, I'm hosting this year. Got 13 people for Christmas lunch and dinner. And
And
then,
what's your vibe with the Christmas lunch, can I ask, or the dinner, mate? Because I feel like it can be quite stressful if you do it the wrong way.
we I share it with my brother and sister, so we revolve every 3 years. I'll just do a barbecue, and I'll enlist my sister and my brother and his wife to bring salads and whatever. So it's pretty laid
Smart.
back
Yeah, and you sort of
and well practiced.
yeah, okay, cool. You got a thing you do. Just that cooking that pork and getting the roast crackling exactly right every Christmas, man. So I always find it.
Um,
Welcome to Ben's Book Club, everybody. We can see everyone starting to stream in here, and we've got a bunch of people already in the chat doing what we normally do when we kick off with Ben's Book Club is we say hi in the chat and where we're from, sort of introduce yourselves to everybody if you feel comfortable doing so. It's always really cool to read about the reach of this club, and we love to meet people from all over. With Ian from all over the earth. Ian
yeah,
is hailing from the UK.
yeah,
Um, he's one of a lot of
yeah,
people in the chat. Hi, Fiona. Hi, Jan. Hi, Mandy.
yeah.
A lot of regulars, which is really cool. Awesome to see you guys. Gordana, hello again. Nice to see you. Christy, hello. Welcome back. Helen, welcome back. Um, Randy, hello, Randy. NY, White Plains, NY. That's not New York, is it? Am
Yeah, yeah,
I?
White Plains is New York. Yeah.
Holy moly, Randy.
Hi,
What
Randy.
time is it over there, mate? Welcome very much. That's awesome. Truly, from Ben's book club is going going around the globe. It's wonderful to see. Steph, hello, Judy.
Well, Jakarta. Hi, Steve. And
Wow.
Auckland.
This is really, I think, speaking though, mate, to from Auckland. Hello, Heather.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Peter.
Brisbane. Wow.
Um, 3:30 a.m., Randy.
Wow.
Mate, my hat's off to you. I mean, Ian, I know what's your rival time, mate, in the UK? What's your time? Because I know that would
It's
be
a bit more civilized. Yeah.
3:30. That's we've got some Chris 8, yeah, Ian's 8:30.
Yeah.
I think Randy gets the hat for the biggest Chris Hammer fan in the chat tonight.
Yeah.
Um, without further ado, let's introduce the wonderful Chris. Um, I feel like I really started doing this particular job of interviewing authors over Zoom, and I really feel like it was Chris and my relationship with Chris that really was able to let me soar on that. And Chris was uh subjected to my early attempts at interviewing authors. So um he's a lovely man. I've known him for a long time. He probably doesn't need much introduction, but oh, hi, Judy, in the chat. Chris is the author of Scrublands, Silver and Trust, and they feature Martin Scarsden and Mandalay Blonde. And then we have Treasure and Dirt, The Tilt, The Seven, and now The Valley with Ivan Lukic and Nell Buchanan. And then obviously Scrublands is now being turned into a very successful TV show on Stan called Scrublands. And I know that we're at work on the second season of that. He keeps on going like you, Chris, your career is just this, mate. It's just going like this.
Yeah.
But the thing I love is that the quality of your work you haven't like, the quality of your work is still really apparent. But can we give, I don't know, like a clap in the chat for the wonderful Chris. Merry Christmas, Christmas with Ben and Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, Nell, yeah, we do all see each other fairly regularly in Australia. Nell's just said in the chat that the author world seems quite small. Chris, would you agree with that? That we all sort of get to know each other?
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly amongst the crime fiction crew in Australia. A
Yeah.
lot of us are relatively new. The last, 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7 years. Incredibly collegiate. We run into each other at writers' festivals, different events. I'll like say in October when The Valley came out, I did a book tour. Ben interviewed me in person, in
Hmm.
Brisbane, right? And
Hmm.
yeah, yeah, and so we
In
run
gold.
into each other. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, it's really collegiate. I found the same thing in the UK too when I've been there too. Same, often the
really.
writers though there have been around for decades, and are highly experienced, but they're just as welcoming.
Yeah, yeah. My experience of other authors from overseas as well has been very similar. Everyone seems to be really lovely. It's because it's our workplace.
Yeah.
It's like the staff room when we get together. The Writers' Festival, though, we just get free muffins sometimes in baskets. So just so everyone is familiar too, we're doing something new in the book club, which we're really excited about. But this wonderful novel, which in theory everyone's read tonight, because we are in a book club, we will be diving deep into the Valley. Um, but we are very excited. We have a signed copy of this book to give away. Yes, that's right. Give away to the question of the night. Ben's Book Club is all about involving the audience, involving people from all across Australia and, with Chris around the world. Um, Anyone from around the world who would like to ask a question of Chris, please put it in the chat. It's really an opportunity for us to get to know each other. It's like we're all meeting. It's like a book club. We all gather around, you have a nice little drink, and we all have a chat about a piece of literature. We just so happen to have the author here. So please have a good question. Pop it in the chat whenever you like. I'll read them out to Chris. Yeah, best one of the night, Chris will choose at the end of the day. Um, so Chris, I was wondering if this is okay, mate, to start on a little bit of a Chris recommends. Is this okay?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because what I want to hear from Chris Hammer, everyone's going on Christmas break in Australia. We're going to the beach, and you have your Cocobana, the little tent that you sit on. You have your beach chair, and you have a book for 8 hours. What do you think we should read on that beach, Chris, to chill out over the summer break?
Okay, I thought I'd restrict myself to crime fiction novels because I guess that's the common thing here. A couple of Australian ones. I really like J.P. Pomeroy's 17 Years Later. Uh,
Yeah, that's a great one this
he's
year.
a New Zealand Australian stroke author, lives here.
Yep.
But this book is actually set in New Zealand, based on loosely on a real case, I think. Um, I think it might be his best yet. Hayley Scrivener's book, Girl Falling. I think it's
Yeah.
found out she's a very good writer, and this book's got a lot of emotional content. So it's not just the
Yeah.
sort of crime book where you're trying to save a puzzle. The other one, uh, Chris Whitaker's an English author, fantastic book. Um, we begin at the end. I'm a bit late to the party on this one. It came out a few years ago. Set in small town America, and it's so
Okay.
evocative, brilliant. Yeah.
Okay. That sounds like something I'd be into. I've read the Pomariat, I've read Scrivener. I haven't read the Whitaker. That sounds like something I'd like.
Yep.
Might have to get into that. Yeah, cool. Thanks for that, Chris. So yeah, those are some options for us, but obviously this is the book that everyone, if you haven't read it already, this should be a buy, I reckon. Put it under the Christmas tree, put it into, well, maybe Santa will bring it to the
And and
kids.
and for those couple of people from the UK, it comes out in a couple of weeks, 2nd of January, I think, in hardback. I think it might already be available as an ebook, but in the UK, it's called The Broken River. So The Broken River and The Valley, the same book. So
Yeah.
please, people in Australia, if you see The Broken River, don't order it if you've already read The Valley.
Unless you're a Chris Hammer completionist and you need all the covers. Because there's a slightly different cover in the UK too, right?
Yeah, yeah. At the moment, I think on the ebook they're using the Australian cover, but it will, I think, have a fresh cover, I think, for the hardback. Yeah.
Yeah, right. We'll move into some questions because we've got some people in the chat already actually asking you a lot of questions. We've got the first one from Ian.
Yeah.
Ian actually helps run the book club and he is a very dedicated member. So we love Ian very much. But Ian is asking, would you ever consider writing a crime book from the criminal's perspective and not the police chasing the criminals? I feel like in the Valley you sort of step into that a little bit, but yeah, what's your answer to that? Would you ever write from a criminal's perspective and humanize them in a different way?
Yeah, I think that's a good. I think that could work really well, particularly, and there are people like Gary Disher with his Wyatt novels have done that really well. You know, Wyatt's a sort of an old-fashioned burglar type person. Um, I think it might work well in one of my books because I've gone from, my first couple of books, Scrublands, for example, the
Hmm.
whole story is told from the point of view of Martin Scarsden, the journalist. Um, my more recent books have two or three different point of view characters. So it would be quite easy, well, not easy, but possible to have one of the point of view characters as the criminal. You
Hmm.
could have criminal as one point of view, cop as another, and someone else in the middle as a third point
Yeah.
of view. So yeah, I reckon that could work really well.
Yeah, and I do think that your books too, with the criminal elements, they're never sort of mustache twirly arch villains. They always seem to have a motivation and a point of view that makes a type of sense, right? So it would be easy maybe for you to step into that a little bit.
Yeah, right from the word go, I decided I didn't want I didn't want it to be white hats and black hats, goodies that are as pure as the
Mm,
driven snow and baddies are just, evil incarnate. I mean, it's not very interesting. So even if someone has done something awful, like killed someone,
yeah.
maybe they started with good intentions. Maybe they've got trapped by circumstances. And also the goodies, if you like, Martin as a journalist is willing to cut a few ethical corners to get the
Yes.
story.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
Ivan and Nell, it's not so much they're bad people, but they certainly make mistakes. They're not that sort
Mm.
of Sherlock Holmes type genius who's three steps ahead of everybody else. In fact, sometimes they're two steps behind.
Yeah, that's true. We've got a question here from Steph as well, and this is a really good one, I think. Steph's question is, what was your timeline from the idea of the Valley to it being published? I guess we can get into the question of, where did the particular idea for this novel first start? And then how did you go about
Yeah.
writing it? And I guess your writing process a little bit surrounding it.
The timeline essentially is about a year. Because I've been doing a book a year for the last 6 years. That year, though, kind of starts before the publication of the previous book, because typically my books have been coming out in October.
Mm,
Typically, I sign off on the final proof edits of that manuscript around July. So there's about 3 months between signing off on that book and its publication. So
mm,
it's good to get cracking on the next one. But so about a year would have been a year from the July 2023, I guess, through to July 2024. The idea, the seed of it, really came from a previous book, The Tilt. Now, the books, as I was saying before, have different points of view. In A Tilt, there's three point of view characters, three timelines, but the present day character is Nell, one of the two detectives, Ivan and Nell. The next book, last year's book, The Seven, Ivan was the point of view character. Nell's very much in the story. You just don't get to read what she's thinking.
mm,
And then this book, The Valley, is again the present day story is Nell. And what happened in that book 2 years ago, Nell and Ivan go to this place, the Barmer Forest, down on the Murray River, and a body is found, and then more bodies are found.
mm,
And what makes it really confronting for Nell is she grew up in that area, and she begins to suspect that members of her own family are implicated in this series of murders.
yeah.
Now, as part of the book, if you haven't read it, this is a spoiler, but it's a couple of years ago, and it's almost necessary to know this before you read the Valley anyway. Not
Hmm.
quite necessary, but helpful.
Yeah.
During that investigation, Nell finds out that she's adopted. Um, and part of the narrative drive in that book is not just finding out who the killers were or are or whatever, but her finding out about her own past. And uh, in the end of the book, there's a family tree, and
Hmm.
It's quite a complicated one. The
Yeah.
reason it's in the back of the book is it's full of spoilers. So when you get to the end, you've probably got a good idea about how everyone's related, but it just sets it out very clearly. It's got Nell's adoptive family and her biological mother and her family and how they're kind of interconnected in this area down in the forest. But when it came out, I was going around promoting it, and a couple of people came up, happened two or three times. People
Yeah.
came up and said, "Oh, that was so good having that family tree in the back of the book. It confirmed what I was thinking or set it clear in my mind, but there's a mistake there." And I thought, "Oh no, what have I done wrong?" Because family trees is a sort of a simple idea, right? And
Hmm.
it is when you're dealing with real people, because you can look up when they were born, when they had kids, when they died. But making them up is a bit more complicated because you think you've got it right, and then you realise, oh, you've got someone, fathering a child at the age of 8 or something like that. So that's what I thought they meant. But what then they went on and said, there's a blank square there. You haven't told us who Nell's biological father was. And and I'm going, well, that's because I don't know. You understand this is a fictional character, and it's only in writing this book that I decided that she was adopted, almost like I
Yeah.
discovered she was adopted.
Yeah.
And for the book, the only important thing is that she learns who her mother was. But um, but I think that planted the seed. That planted
Mhm.
the seed for this book, and it started bothering me. Yeah, who was or is Nell's father? Is he
Mm.
out there somewhere? And that's how the book begins. I mean,
Mm.
I'm assuming most people have read it, but Nell and Ivan are called to this remote mountain valley. Um, a local entrepreneur, Wolfgang Burnside, has been found murdered. They start investigating. It's a pretty bog standard police procedural. And then the forensics team, Carol and Blake, they discover that the victim is a close blood relative of Nell's. They're doing DNA tests to see if they can, you know, detect a trace of the killer. Instead, they realise the victim is related to Nell through her biological father.
Yeah. Yeah. Such
And,
a good
and so
story.
off we go.
Yeah.
So for Nell, on one hand, for reasons that are explained in the book, she and Ivan are prevailed upon to stick with the investigation. So she's part of this ongoing police investigation. They're trying to find a killer, but at the same time, she's investigating her own past, trying to work out who her father was,
Mm.
how she's related to the victim, how her father met her mother, whether her mother had ever been to this place, the valley, etc., etc. And that gives um, it's a mystery, so it's intriguing for that reason, but it's also uh, it gives it the story emotional weight. It's not
Yeah.
just an arm's length police procedural.
Which is what you're really good at. You always do that. You always have emotional seems to be your in. You like
Yeah,
the character's emotional response and the story of how they deal with things. And then the mystery and the plot and all those things sort of hang off the character, which I really admire.
yeah.
Um, Further to Steph's question, I'm really interested too, because she's, the idea of the timeline between the idea of then the valley. So when do you actually start literally typing words out on the page? Like you've got this idea. Do you have it all mapped out? Do you have it all really clear?
Oh God, no. No, oh, if only. So I might start typing quite early and have words
Yeah.
on the page, but there's no guarantee they're going to end up in a book. So with the book last year, The Seven, I started writing a point of view character. It was a return character from one of the Martin Scarsden books,
Hmm.
and Zelda, and she was going to go back to her own hometown. At the beginning of that book, an accountant is found dead, a town
Hmm.
accountant, which is kind of good because in a small country town, the accountant is going to know all the secrets, right? All the financial secrets,
Yeah,
all
yeah,
the
for
accounts.
sure.
So I thought Zelda would be great. She's an accountant. So she goes back, I make it her own hometown, and I get about 8 chapters from her point of view wasn't working, so I just scrapped it and
Oh,
scrapped her. She's not even in the book as any sort of character. Um,
wow.
so
Does that hurt that day when you drag that into the bin and you press delete and empty trash? Like, does that hurt deep
well,
down?
I'm probably doing it. I may be doing it because it's not working, but just as often or more often, I'm doing it because I've got a better idea, so
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
going to
that's
work
key.
better. So, but yeah, and we've spoken about this many times, but I, I'm I'm not a plotter. I don't plot
Mm.
things out in advance. I'm a pantser. So the story comes as I'm writing it. It's not very efficient. Things like that happen where I end up chucking away enormous
Yeah.
amounts of things. But what it's doing is it's helping develop the story. My I realise now one of the big challenges, a kind of an early bottleneck I've got to get past, is who's telling the story. So with
Yeah.
those first few books, Scrublands and Silver, right from the start, I knew Martin is telling the story. And then in Trust, Martin and Mandy are telling the story. And then in the first Ivan and Nell book, it's Treasure and Dirt. It's the two points of view. It's the two cops. It's Ivan and Nell. I've thrown them together in very, very difficult circumstances. They don't know each other. They don't
Mm.
know whether to trust each other. But who's telling a story is pretty clear. Since then, though, I've branched out in a tilt, the seven, the valley. You got 3 point of views.
Yeah.
So typically, there's a storyline set in the present day, and it's going to be kind of the murder investigation. So that's going to be told from the point of view of either Ivan or Nell, not from both of them, because that just would um, is a bit make it a bit clumsy. We
Yeah, okay.
says, but in the previous timelines, if you like, point of view, I've got to work out whose story is it, who's going to tell it, who'd be in a position to tell that story.
Yeah.
So in in the seven, there's a storyline that's told from the point of view from a young servant girl, Bezzy. She's 15 in 1913,
Mm.
and that's told through her letters. But it took me quite a while to settle on her. So I'm the book I'm writing at the moment. I've got two point of views set in the present day.
Right.
I'm thinking I need another one in the past. So that's what I'm working towards at the moment,
Yeah.
trying to figure that out.
Yeah, it's such a I think when I used to think about authors and how they must write, maybe I didn't think about it too much, but it does, interviewing so many authors and being an author myself, it does seem to be a series of more like discovery,
Mm.
less of creation and more of discovery. Like, who is the person who's going to tell this? What do they feel like? It feels like that way too when you add more backstory to Nell or Ivan in each subsequent book, which dives into their characters in a deeper way.
Yeah, sometimes you're exactly right. It feels. I always had the impression
Mm.
that someone who was a crime writer would have an amazing mind for a plot and would have it all mapped out, all
Hmm.
set out, and then they'd write the story and add the flourishes and the
Yeah.
colour and all of that. What I realise is that um, I'm not alone. There's a lot of people a lot
Yeah.
of crime writers who kind of make it up as they go along. But you're right. It's almost sometimes it feels like the story is already there. I'm trying
Mm.
to uncover it.
Yeah.
Or, so with Scrumlands, I had the idea early on the journalist going to a remote town to do an anniversary story a year after a terrible event. Thought, what's a terrible event? Came up with the idea of the priest shooting the 5 people. So Martin's in the town, begins to suspect that the accepted story of why the priest, Byron Swift, had shot the parishioners, the story sort of perpetuated not just by the police but by his own newspaper, is not the real story, and so he starts digging. At that point in the story, as the author, I'm kind of with Martin because I don't know why the priest did what he did. So I'm trying to uncover the story. I'm
Yeah.
trying to find the killer. Now, that sounds like a mad process, right? But the upside is I think it gives a bit of authenticity. And
Mm.
it means I'm not sort of artificially putting in red herrings or uh,
Yeah, Martin's genuinely trying to figure the case out while you're also authentically trying to do the same thing. And
yes.
being a journalist yourself as well, it must have been an interesting way to like figure a thing out. It's almost like a psychological trick, right? Like I'm not creating everything out of nothing. I'm digging something up that already exists. It's a different way of thinking about it.
Yeah, I'm trying to get it so everything will hang together in a coherent way.
Yeah,
Maybe that's another way of maybe putting it.
no, that's the art of it though. I mean, trying to yeah. Then that's the miraculous thing. Like the Valley feels like you had Nell's backstory mapped out when you first came up with her, and you're now only just deciding to reveal it. But instead, it
Yeah.
sounds like you're just sort of figuring her out as we get to know her, which is kind of cool.
So this is the fourth book in the Ivan and Nell series. If you go back to that first one, Treasure and Dirt, and the idea I had was two people who don't know each other have got real reasons to mistrust each other. They're thrown together. Um, if you read that book, there is no mention in it of Nell being adopted because I don't know that, and Nell doesn't know that. So we kind of discover this together, Nell and I, as as I write the.
Yeah,
Uh,
I like that. I like that. I feel like that feels very authentic, as you said. Um, we'll move to another question. We have one here from Chev. Chev has asked, does Chris have an in-depth knowledge of geography and landscape? Because Chev says you describe the land so well and descriptively. So I guess really the question's about your relationship to geography, how you think about it when you're writing, and what you aim to achieve with your descriptions of it. Because it is, a lot of people say this about your stuff, man. They're like, it's very descriptive and very evocative.
yeah, look, I'll answer that in two different ways. The first is just the process of writing the book. So as I say, I'm kind of making the story up as I write or trying to discover the story.
Yeah.
But I have the setting right from the very start. And what I figure I'm trying to do is, yeah, I'm trying to get a good plot. I'm trying to follow the characters, work out what's making them tick, go for the ride with them. Um, the emotional content, the pacing. But the setting has to be right there from the start because that's the stage upon which all this action will play out, where the characters appear, where they
Yeah.
breathe and die. And so what I figure I'm trying to do when I write a book is it's almost like cast a spell. I'm going to invite the reader into this different world. It's very adjacent to our contemporary world here in Australia, um, often in fictionalized towns, but in real landscapes. And that's where it plays out. And I think if I can get all of those different aspects working together, then the whole becomes greater than the sum of the parts, and you can get that really immersive reading experience.
Mm.
Yeah, which is what I like when I read a book, right?
Yeah.
The second part of the question, just on the practicalities of it, yeah, I like the Australian bush. I love travelling through it. Um, I live in Canberra, grew up in Canberra, which is still a kind of a bush town. I went to uni up at Bathurst. The first book that I wrote that got published was a non-fiction book called The River. And it's me traveling down the Murray-Darling Basin in the summer of 2008, 2009. Now, that was right at the height of the millennial drought. And I went to places then that really stuck in my mind. And I spent a week at this irrigation town out in the Western Riverina, which where the river was bone dry, right? Irrigation town
Mm.
without a drop of water. That gave me the setting for Scrublands.
Yeah, wow.
I spent a week in the Barmah Forest, the world's biggest river red gum forest. It was dying. That's the setting for the tilt. Um, so I went out, I talked to people, I photographed things, I sort of built up this kind of deep knowledge um, of those areas. And I'm delighted to say that um, that book, when it came out, sold hardly anything, right?
Hmm.
Won some prizes, and I got invited to Writers' Festival, all that, but no money. Anyway, Melbourne University Press is going to release it
Oh, okay,
early
wow.
next year. So a new edition. I mean, I'm going to write a new forward to it, and that. So
Oh, cool.
really, so if people are interested in the sort of landscapes and that, if you read that book, you'll be able to go, oh, now this is where I got the idea for this from.
Oh,
Where
that's
you got the
that's
idea from that.
kind of like, it's the birthplace of Chris Hammer, the writer, his early stuff. We get to see link all these things in your fiction back to this non-fiction world. That's cool.
Yeah. It's where the rural noir bit came from. Because it was
Yeah,
pretty
wow.
desperate times, I tell you. Desperate for the environment, desperate for the farmers, desperate for the towns, desperate for uh, Adelaide. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. Um, I've got another question here from Tim. I think this is a really fun one. The question is, when you model, I like that Tim sort of assumes this. When you model a character on someone you know, do you tell them?
I don't.
well,
So it's,
do you not tell them or do you not model it
I
on
don't
someone?
model them on real people.
Okay.
Now, I must be influenced by real people. And I know some authors definitely do, to the point where it's pretty obvious. Um, and their friends and relatives live in trepidation at, every new book. Yeah, will I be in it, and will I be presented kindly? I don't. They often, characters start, um, if I write a new book with, say, Ivan and Nell, I know them already, or with Martin, so where else am I taking them? But the characters they run into in the books often just start as like a plot point. Say Nell has to find out something that's happened in the past. Well, okay, she can find a newspaper clipping or a document or something. But even then, she'll go have to find someone who was there and ask them. So they start just as a means to an end, a plot point. But then I'm thinking, well, why not make this character interesting? Make them
Hmm.
threatening or sinister or absurd or quirky, funny, whatever.
Yeah, make them
Um,
stand out.
and sometimes that's the end of it. But sometimes they kind of take hold, and then as the book develops, and I need something else to happen, I think, well, why? It's a general rule, and I'm guilty of this. More characters make it harder for the reader to follow.
Yeah.
So the fewer characters, the better. If you bring someone back that's already there in that town, for example, good. Um, and they can really take on a life of their own. Now, I know in the seven there's this politician. He's a big bloke, got a gut, red faced, bit of a blowhard. And
Hmm.
a lot of people thought it was based on Barnaby Joyce. Who knows why? Um, but but seriously, it wasn't. It wasn't. I can see why they could think that. But
Yeah.
so no, I don't really base any characters on people I know. I guess with Martin, he's based um, as an amalgam of some of the journalists and photographers, camera people who I met in conflict zones when I was a roving foreign correspondent. The
Yeah.
people who they don't have PTSD, they're just traumatized.
Yeah.
They're forever kind of trying to deal with that. So
Yeah.
Martin was not based on any one person I met, but a kind of a bit of a amalgam of that. Others, yeah, I don't know where they come from.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that answer. I was hoping that we'd get some gossipy tea spilled on some politician you shook hands with once or something like that. But um, So thanks for that question, Tim, as well. We're going to move down to Fiona's. Fiona's question is something that I think I've asked you before, but it's to do with this idea of the names of your characters. And so Fiona's list is Simmons, Hannibal, Wolfgang, Willard, Terramina, Cornell, and Vickery. And Fiona says they aren't usually in the top 10 baby name lists. So where are you getting your names? Where are you getting these unusual names, Chris?
Simmons isn't so weird.
No.
Vickery, I reckon, does come from an old friend of mine, but his surname is Vickery. But the character in the book has got nothing to do with that. What happened was when I was writing Scrublands, I had very low expectations. I thought, after a while, I thought this isn't bad, I'll get published. But because of my experience with those non-fiction books, The River, and then there was a second one, The Coast, that sold nothing, I just thought, well, that's what happens if you write a book in Australia. And and,
Yeah.
and for a lot of authors, it definitely is what happens.
Yeah.
Um, so I think at some point I just got a bit bored and I started making up these sort of fanciful names. They're sort of somewhat Dickensian. So in Scrublands, I think Martin Scarsden is a good name. It's not too over the top, but then you've got Mandalay Blonde and Harley Snouch.
Sorry, I just really enjoy that. It just rolls off the tongue, that name, hey.
Yeah. Anyway, the book comes out, it's successful, and I was feeling a bit kind of awkward about it, a bit sheepish.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And a woman came up to me at an event where I was signing books and saying how she really liked the names, that they were very distinctive. And the reason she liked them is because they helped her keep track of who's who in the books. Because
Yeah.
there's usually multiple plot lines, right? And I went, oh, you know what? I think she's right. And
Mm,
then on reflection, of course, I work with, like, seriously, probably the best editors in Australia. And if it wasn't working, they would have pulled me up on it, or told me to wind it in a bit. But then Scrublands came out, and then there's a lot of recurring characters. So not just Martin, there's Mandalay Blonde, the policeman, Morris Montefiore, other characters. And I thought, well, I can't have all the continuing characters with outlandish names and all
mm.
the new characters had rather sort of beige bland names. So I've had to lean into it a bit,
Yeah, yeah.
Wolfgang, Terramina. I think peak sort of silly name maybe was Treasure and Dirt, where there's a guy who he runs an earth moving equipment business, and his name's Trevor Topsoil, and I think that may have been a bit too much, but yeah, it's something I continue with, and people do seem to like it.
I like it. Isn't there also, I think you mentioned to me before, there's a band. Is there a band named Mandalay Blonde?
Yeah, during COVID, a guy in the UK got in contact and he's recording music in lockdown, but the technology now is that you can record in isolation. So, the drummer was in Switzerland and the piano player was in Scotland or something like that. And he wanted to know if they could call it Mandalay Blonde. I said, sure. So, yeah, if you're on Spotify, uh, yeah, look it up, Mandalay Blonde.
Yeah, yeah. There you go, Ian, as well. Keep an eye out for them. I'm sure they're gigging or something. Chris Hammond.
I, Gee, I wish they were. I'd go and see them.
Oh man, like Ian, if you go to a gig, you need to video it and put it in the chat or something, or put it
Yeah.
in the Facebook group because I'll send it to Chris. Um, Not that you have to, Ian. That's just if you want to on your own volition and happen to record it, would love it. Thank you for that question, Fiona. We've got a sort of a question here from Nell. Nell is saying, "Do you know how lovely it is to have a book with a character that has my name in it?" And then Nell has said down here, "I still haven't ever held a book with my name in it, so that's my blatant bid to win the book." Now, you do have to ask a question, okay? So we have to come up with the best question. But just so you know, Chris, there are people out there who are blatantly begging for the book, book in the chat.
Oh, I'm
Um,
glad you like that now. That's
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah, it is cool, huh? And thank you for going through the audiobook, which we have a lot of people in the club who love the audiobooks as well. which is really cool to see. A lot of people are reading that way now, which is, I think markedly different than even a decade ago.
Oh, even when look when Scrublands came out, so that's 2018. The audio people sent me copies of the audio books, and it's like a box with 13 CDs in it, because that's how people used to get audiobooks. And this is like 2018, 2019,
Mm,
play them in their cars. Now, of course, because you can just download them onto your phone and play them in the car like that, play them around the house, wireless headphones, all the rest. Yeah, it's really
yeah.
taken off. One thing on that though, Ben, thanks for bringing it up, is all of my books have got maps in the front. And I think if you get the audio books, you don't get the maps.
Oh, yeah.
So all you've got to do is Google me. I've got a website. All the maps are on the website. You can download them. You can print them off. Uh, Even if you've got the book with the map in the front and you want a larger version, you can do that as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think I remember you talking about you actually had them framed or something somewhere. You actually had some cool copies of them. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. So it's like a special treat. I could run off and find one, but I don't know where I put my. Um,
Too far.
so a lot of work goes into maps because typically
Yeah.
they're made up places. And so I worked with this great guy in Melbourne called Alexander Potocznik, and I sent him descriptions. I sent him a crude sort of hand drawn map from that I developed
Yeah.
in writing the book. There's a lot of to and fro, and the map in the valley is just brilliant. So it's kind of like a special treat to myself. I get him to do a large scale version and do it in color, and I get them printed off on
So
on proper art paper,
that's
get
so
them
cool.
framed.
People who are wondering, that's sort of what it looks like too. They're
Oh,
awesome.
thanks, Ben. Yeah. And so it's a special treat. I've got these proper, beautifully coloured, beautifully rendered maps, and yeah,
That's cool. That's something to
yeah,
hold on to, hey? That's
yeah.
awesome. I'm sorry, I'm trying to go through the chat. I'm just so you know, there's a little it tells me how far behind I am in reading the chat. I have 32 new messages to read.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So
I
I
can see
apologize if I don't get to everyone's questions. Gordana's got a good one, a little one here that I think is really interesting. But Gordana's question is, what was the most challenging chapter to write and why? That's a cool question. Yeah, was there any particular moment that was a little bit more difficult to nail than everything else?
in the valley. So sometimes there's chapters in my books that come really easily. Sometimes it's like the action chapter. So in Scrublands, when they're caught in a house in a bushfire. And in the valley, there's a scene where Simmons almost drowns, and it's very pacey. Hopefully it grabs the reader. That's not that hard to write because I'm imagining it, I'm visualizing it.
Yeah.
The more difficult bits, little sections, are the descriptive bits because I'm not there. I've got to imagine that. I think in this one, one of the final chapters where they're trying to uncover the cisterns near the old house to find,
Hmm.
it's big spoiler, but trying to find the gold nut. I've got a lot of people there,
Hmm.
a lot of interactions.
A lot of things to keep track of.
Yeah, and Nell. It's told from Nell's point of view, but it's touching on things that the relationship between Simmons and some of his old contemporaries from
Yeah.
before. So she's telling it, but there's things she can't know.
Mm.
So, and if it would kind of break the spell if she starts explaining stuff that she's got no way of knowing. So
Yeah.
it's always a bit tricky that bit where you bring it together.
Yeah.
The other time now this is, and I can't really put my finger on a particular point, but if you think of a crime fiction book, you'll often get a very dramatic start. um, as is the case, say, in this book. Um, that's maybe not that difficult to do. Getting the
Mm.
ending right, a satisfying ending where everything's brought together and you've had a big reveal and,
Yeah.
it all kind of makes sense. That's
Yeah.
more difficult. But often the most difficult things, and this is where a lot of books, I think, fall over, is those middle chapters,
Yeah.
because that's where the story can lag. And you might have some um, sort of tentpole chapters, things where stuff does happen. So in the valley, that chapter where Simmons almost drowns, that's very
Mm.
dramatic. But then you've got to get from there to something else, and it's those transition sort of chapters
Yeah.
that can be difficult because you don't want it to lag. You don't want
Can't be
to
boring.
read it, and you see it's the same. If you're streaming a TV show, they're often really good at hooking you in, right? At
Yeah.
first bit, any kind of crime show,
Yeah.
thriller or that. But it's the middle bit, the character development, the exposition can be often quite difficult because it's information the reader needs, but you want
Mm.
to tell it in a way that it's a story. It's not just like an
Yeah.
information dump.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
question, though. That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a good question. Thanks, Gordana, for that one. We've got a question from Randy, who's from New York. So I really do want to get to Randy's question,
Yeah.
effort from 3:30 a.m. or 4, whatever it is now. But Randy's question is, take us through your writing routine. Do you write every day? How many words do you hit? Do you have a target? What's your sort of writing process just look like practically?
Yeah, it changes as the year goes along. So at the start, I'm trying to write, but I keep, is that right? Is that where I want to go? And because I do write by the seat of my pants, having a word target just isn't going to work for me. Because
Mm,
I'll get to a place and I'll go, oh, that doesn't make sense. What's going to happen next? Why, how can I get that happen? Or why has that happened? And so I'll just spend the morning staring at the screen, and then I'll go off and I'll have a walk or do some exercise or something. And then a solution, if you like, to that particular problem will come to me. So that could be a very productive day ultimately, but I haven't actually written any words. And then there might be a day where, just like that drowning scene, it's me just kind of writing what happens, and the words flow really quickly. And at the end of the day, I've got a couple of thousand words. The start of later on in the process, after I've submitted the manuscript and I'm in the editing phase, I can definitely give myself a word count to get through every day.
yeah,
Because
okay.
often you've got 2 or 3 weeks to go through and edit. It's like you do a structural edit, then you do a copy edit, then you do a proof edit, and you've got a set deadline to get that back. So yeah, and
Mm,
you're using a different part of your brain then too. So I can get up in the morning, I can work all day when I'm editing. When
mm,
I'm doing the creative bit, I tend to run out of steam by about lunchtime.
mm.
So I'll write every day or try and write every day. Um, it's not really self-discipline. It's more I'm a bit addicted to it. My day doesn't feel right unless I've done some.
That's kind
Um,
of cool though, that's your job that you get paid to do is the thing that you
yeah,
feel brings you to life. That's cool.
yeah, and fortunately, because all those years as a journalist, particularly a traveling journalist, I don't have to be home and I don't need to be in a quiet space. So airports, if I go to Sydney, I live in Canberra. It's about a 4-hour train ride. It's great. I'm very productive. Planes, whatever. Um, so I'll try and work every morning, and then I sort of run out of steam about lunchtime.
Mm,
And then there's a lot of other stuff involved in being a writer, and there's a lot of admin, um, and social media, all sorts of stuff.
yeah.
But then as the year goes along, I get more and more consumed by the story. So even if I'm not writing, if I'm out shopping, I'm doing the housework, I'm walking, whatever, it's in my head by then.
Earning, yeah.
I'm sort of getting more and more consumed by it.
Mm.
I'll be cooking dinner and my wife will say something to me, and then she'll go, oh God, you're not listening. You've got your head in that book. She's dead right, of course.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, thank you for that question, Randy, and thanks for that answer. Um, Chris, Nell is arguing with us in the chat. She's protesting. It was a question that she had, which
Yes.
is how nice, how nice. Look, technically, Nell, you're not wrong. I do see you. It was a question. Technically, you're right. How nice is it? Do you know how nice it is, Chris, that there's a Nell in the book that she relates to?
Well, that's great, and it's great that you relate to her.
Yeah.
I really like Nell. I think she's a great character.
She's
Um,
up there for one of my faves of yours, man. I really like her.
yeah, I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think now of characters called Chris in books that I. There must be heaps of them, but I can't really put my finger on one. They're probably they're probably all villains.
I'm just trying to think of the same thing. Surely, yeah, we've lost our marbles. Surely there's a Chris.
Well, it must be a band. There must be lots of bands.
Is there? Surely there must be.
Yeah.
Well, you know what now? Good question. We relate. Appreciate that. Um, it's also Randy's birthday. Happy birthday, Randy. Randy, where was that? I just read it. It was really good. Randy's um buying the river and one extra book that I don't already have for his birthday present, which is wonderful. Everyone's saying happy birthday.
Yeah,
Um,
happy birthday, Randy.
that's awesome. So we've got a question here. Now, I don't know whether you've all been aware, but I've been doing a little social experiment tonight in the book club. I have, let me see, how many questions have I prepped for Chris? I have 26 questions. So I read the book. I've written all these questions down for Chris. Today, my main aim was to not ask a single question that I wrote myself. And beyond the Christmas recommendations, congratulations, book club members. We've made it tonight. We haven't had a single question from Ben, and you guys have taken over, which is what the main aim has always been. So thank you. We're nearly at the end, can you believe, Chris, of
Yeah.
our hour, which is crazy. So we'll get you in a second to go through and have a look. Yeah, go ahead, mate. You have a question or want to say something?
No, Christopher Robin. There's a Chris in a book. Thank
Oh,
you, Fiona.
is someone writing that?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, Fiona. Thank you, Fiona.
It's
Yeah, there's a
Fiona.
Chris. Is there a Ben? Who's a Ben? Surely there's a Ben.
I'm thinking there's a pen.
There has to be a Ben, you know. Benedict? No, that's an actor. Anyway, yeah, strange that. We do always try to name them interesting names, I guess.
Here's a good question from Mandy.
Yeah.
Ben, when are you bringing out another book?
For me,
Yeah.
I'm not giving the book away.
No, no. When are you publishing one?
That's good. No, Mandy, I appreciate that. Thank you, Mandy. It's up in the air, if I'm being honest with you. There's a number of projects that are all ticking over into certain different ways, but I will definitely, you guys will have the ground seat when you're in the book club. I'll let you know as first contact when my wife, and then all of you guys get to know. So I'll let you know as soon as I have any info on that stuff. I've got a question from Joanne to finish off the night. And as you go through and have a think about which has been your favorite from the night, Chris,
Mm.
Joanne's question is, can we know well, I'll word it exactly as Joanne has. What is your next book about? And I feel like she's a bit demanding with this question, which I kind of like the vibe. What is your next book about, Chris? And when can we expect it?
Um,
We need dates. We need information.
well, I'm hoping October 2025. So
Oh,
my
great.
last, I guess, 5 or 6 books have come out in October. This is
Yeah.
in Australia and New Zealand. Um, what will it be about? I reckon there'll be a murder pretty close to the front of it. Um, so that's a
Sorry,
bit
I don't mean to
smart.
laugh.
That's a bit smart, Alecky. I'm thinking I might, you've heard of this here first. I'm thinking of actually setting it in the outback. I'm often sort of held up as a an exponent of outback noir, but
Back
only
now,
one of my
yeah.
books, really, Treasure and Dirt, is set in the outback proper. So I'm thinking of that. I'm
Awesome.
also thinking, so I'm still at the stage where I've got a setting.
Mm.
got some ideas, like crime sort of ideas, but now I'm thinking, well, who's telling the story? And I'm thinking two new characters, but I'm still tossing up whether it's going to be an
Oh.
Ivan and Nell book or whether I'll bring back Martin.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Ooh. That's I feel like that's an exclusive.
that is an exclusive. Yeah,
That's big news, Chris.
yeah, and I can't tell you any more because I don't actually know. But that's where I'm at. It is. That sounds very woolly, I know, but it is actually evolving quite quickly.
Wow, I mean, that's exciting, man. That's such an exciting place as an author to be in.
Mm.
We've got a few people. Fiona says she wants all three. So
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. Hey,
Yeah.
Fiona now, if he actually does all three, you can claim that, right? That can go into your bio that you helped Chris come up with that particular narrative construction.
Well, Martin is in a number of the Ivan and Nell books. He's just a very, very minor character.
Cameo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nell's pointed out Benjamin Button. Thank you, Nell. That's a really good one because that's the title of those books, that short story as
Right.
well. So Chris, do you have a choice from tonight? Who do you think has
Oh,
nailed a question? If you wouldn't mind going back through and having a bit of a scroll,
oh
you can read the
golly.
chat. And while you do that,
I
um,
th I think maybe the question um, about basing my characters on people. Who asked that one?
who was that? I feel like it was someone named Tim.
Maybe it was
Whoever asked
Tim.
that question about characters based on people, can you type into the chat, please? Just trying to scroll back through and read. Hopefully, someone can.
Tim Woohoo. That's him.
Was it Tim?
I guess he's going
Oh yeah.
woohoo.
Woohoo. All right. Well, congratulations, Tim. It might arrive after Christmas, just with posts and everyone going on holidays and stuff, but you can expect um, the Valley in the mail. Tim, if you wouldn't mind just making contact, or I'll see if I can, yeah, just make contact with me on Facebook. In fact, let me see if I can post the Facebook book club. Those of you who are not a member of the book club regularly, and you really enjoyed tonight's chat, excuse me while I get the group URL. We'd love to have you regularly show up to the chat. We do these sorts of things every month. But that's the link in the chat if anyone wants to click that. And then, Tim, could you please message me? Um, it won't let me message from that group. So you have to message me and then I can get your address and stuff and we can organize to ship that book out to you. But next month, we will be reading this book, which has got an interesting title. Like, I've actually struggled to say this. Like, I always want to go woo woo, which are probably not how you're supposed to say it. But the next book club will be on the 28th of January. So we have a bit of a Christmas break. I think this book promises to be one of the most interesting book club chats we've had. I haven't read it yet, and I've heard, and I had a bit of a read on Goodreads. I like to read how people's responses are because it can kind of gauge what I'll expect on the chat here. The people either really, really love it or they don't like it at all. So I think that makes for good book club fodder. Um, so I'm really interested to see and to talk to Allah and to read that book, and hopefully we can get some people talking in the chat, in the book club Facebook group as well, because I think it's going to be really cool. But can we give everyone's typing it already? Can we all give Chris a clap? We'll have Chris back next year, of course. We always have Christmas with Chris. It is a tradition now on Ben's Book Club to have Chris in December. Um, and yeah, thank you, book club group. You guys are one of my favorite parts of my year. I love coming and talking with you all and talking about good books and talking to good people. But just your responses and the banter we have back and forth really make me happy. So thank you for an awesome year. Um, we're doing really, yeah, I'm really proud of this group that we have, and thank you for all the regulars. Much love to all of you over Christmas break. Have a good, safe holiday. Enjoy it. Be on the beach. Take a Chris Hammer with you. Not the real Chris Hammer, that would be odd, but take him in book form. Yeah, Merry Christmas. And yeah, Chris, thank you, man. And have a good Christmas break yourself, hey?
Thanks. Happy holidays, everyone.
All right, cool. Thanks, guys. And yeah, Tim, hit me up and Merry Christmas, everybody. All right, bye.